Call to order the City of Norwood Planning Commission for March 1st, 2023. First item on the agenda today is the approval of minutes. Do I have a motion to approve the minutes?
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes.
Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Mrs. Town, would you please call the roll?
Chairman Powers,
Yes.
Mayor Schneider,
Yes.
Mrs. Sickinger,
Yes.
Mr. Hockney,
Yes.
Mr. Sewer.
Yes.
Moving on to item B, old business, ongoing zoning ordinance amendment review. Today we have a discussion of the second consolidated draft zoning ordinance amendment, originally prepared by Mr. Skelly. December 6th, we've been addressing it at our last couple of meetings. At the February meeting, Planning Commission members requested Mr. Skelly to prepare a supplemental research on electric vehicle charging stations, including a brief survey of Ohio municipalities. Mr. Skelly, would you give us a verbal rundown of your research?
Sure. Good afternoon, members. So at the last meeting, the members requested some additional information as to what other municipalities in the state are doing. So I believe I mentioned at the prior meeting that it's difficult to find a lot of information, zoning ordinances that are being prepared. What I did find, and it's on the last page, there's about 8 municipalities I contacted, looked at their zoning ordinances, and primarily, there's really not too much there. They're still fairly loose or open-ended how they regulate it. Sometimes they don't regulate it at all whatsoever. The big takeaways, I think, is that I think most people and the literature would prefer to recognize these things as accessory uses. So you don't want to encourage paid parking lots that would be either exclusively for EV charging stations or anything of that sort. You don't necessarily want to force people into going through conditional use hearings. Sometimes for the larger ones, some municipalities would require a land development plan. We do not have a land development or subdivision ordinance or code to provide. That would be something to consider, but like I said, the bigger issue is land development or not. And aside from that, there was a couple things for signage. I think that was kind of, sometimes more of a focus or made more of a big deal. If they wanted to have incidental off-site billboards and other type of related things to offset the income, but that was about it. The additional 2 pages that I included was just more context. So definitely Ohio, like other states, are gravitating towards providing for these things, whether it's being driven locally or it's being driven in this case by the state, providing additional subsidies at the state level and also through federal programs. And then the second page was more just an outline of how other municipalities are proceeding with trying to adopt EV policies within their zoning ordinance. And I brought that to your attention because in the last 2 meetings, we were talking about whether to make it more mandatory, that we should be very proactive to include that. I still say, being a relatively small urban area and where we are with regards to the number of people that have and don't have EV vehicles, I don't think we're there yet dictating or telling people, okay, if you're going to have a large parking lot or for Surrey Square, or if we would get a Walmart or a Target, you have to have 10 or 20% of your stalls EV designated. I just don't believe we're there yet, or it's appropriate for Norwood.
Discussion.
May I start?
Please.
I'll start the discussion. It's interesting to think about this electric vehicle. Right now for the city of Norwood, the city has one electric vehicle. It's a Nissan Leaf that we are operating, and we have a charging station that is in the back of City Hall where we can charge multiple vehicles if we wanted to. We also, the city installed one charging station, public use charging station, at the corner of Station and Sherman Avenue at the municipal lot there, which community members can charge their car. Also, anybody coming in to the city can charge their car there. What I have found driving an electric vehicle is that charging stations are typically placed in areas that are convenient to food or to shopping. So close to us, there is what are called level 3. There's 3 different levels. Level 1 is typically your home charging unit, a 110, maybe a 220. 110 volts or 220 volt charger is a level 1. The level 2 is specifically 220. It'll charge a little bit quicker. And then there's the level 3, which is considered a fast charge. The fast charge station that is over in the Oakley area, where what used to be Millicron is, but ultimately where the Kroger Center is and Meijer and all that. That fast charge center, I went over there. There are, I think, 6 or 8 charging stations that will service Fords or Nissans or any of the other vehicles that are out there, BMWs. And then there's also 6 or 8 that are set up specifically for Tesla, because of course Tesla was the precursor to it. What I've found when I go over there to the one that's close to Meijer is on a Saturday morning, you better make sure you can look at the app and see if there's one open, because they're filled. People are going there. It takes about an hour to fill their card, to totally charge their card back up, and they'll go inside Meijer's or they'll go inside Target and they do their shopping, or they go in the restaurant that's there and they eat, and then they come out and their car is totally charged up. What I've also found is if you're planning trips, you plan your trips around that. So if you're going to drive, you would drive to a place where you're going to have lunch. You charge your car up for a half an hour, 45 minutes. While you're there, you're doing something else. You get back in and you can make your way to Florida doing that. So the way these charging stations are set up, and I was reading through this first page, the press release that came out from Governor DeWine back in, a couple months ago, they're basically saying that Ohio has $100 million for charging stations, but they're concentrating on basically the highways, on the interstate corridors. So if people are traveling from New York to Florida in their electric vehicles, they'll be able to stop. And that's one of the areas where I say Norwood needs to take a look at this, because if you look at the charging stations, we're in a perfect position to put one in, to put these in, and to bring people to the city to spend some money. So it's an interesting way they're setting these up. These are not like gas stations, but I'm sure Ford, Chevrolet, I'm sure that when they were moving to all the, everybody had to have a Ford, everybody had to have a car, they were looking at where can we put gas stations. They just put them every place, any place that you could put a gas station, they put them in. This has more in our lifetime. This is a new implementation of an infrastructure, the electric charging infrastructure, and they're giving a lot of thought to it. They're putting a lot of money into it. I think that the city of Norwood needs to get ahead of it. And I would like to, as we talked last time in this, I'd like to be proactive in setting the regulations and sort of what we expect. And instead of trying to come at it from the backside, somebody brings an idea to us and we say, no, we don't like that. That's not where we want it. Let's put some structure in place up in front of these other things. Mike, I really appreciate the diagram or the chart that you put together for the different communities that tells a little bit about the charging stations. We talk about ancillary building use or private use. We do want to regulate, we don't want power lines going across concrete sidewalks. We want to make sure that that's not occurring, and that's something we do need to put into our zoning. We do want to look at it was brought up at one of the meetings, can you post online, hey, bring your car to my house and you can charge up for $50? We want to look at sort of regulating that part of it to say, if you're putting in for home use, it should be home use only, not for the rest of the citizens to come to. So there's a couple of things I think we need to put out there that put us ahead of it. The other thing is charging stations are going to be really used in certain areas, close to a restaurant, close to retail, we want to drive, if we're trying to drive that growth, if we're trying to drive our economic growth, shouldn't we be sort of plotting out, okay, charging stations should be here and here and here, because those are areas we'd like to see this type of stuff. And then in other areas we'd say, well, maybe we prohibit it from those areas. So that's the whole reason we're having this discussion, I think. and then putting some sort of, I guess, ordinance change in place, or ordinance in place to control some of that stuff. That's my quick overview of it. I think we're on the right track in having discussions and trying to get this into our zoning stuff. I'll end with that.
You're looking at me like you're surprised I don't have something to say.
Do you have something to say?
I don't know, there was a lot of conversation in the meeting minutes last month about restrictive or what are we trying to accomplish?
Yeah.
And I think after listening to Vic, I believe this is business's responsibility. I do not believe, and that was actually, Mike, you had a comment similar to that, that the businesses, if they need it, they're going to put it in. And it's a capitalist, it's capitalism. And I really believe we have a lot of other needs that are higher. I don't own an electric car, thinking about a hybrid, but I don't own one, so I'm not against them. I just don't know where, we're talking about zoning, not really paying for things. So to me, I've always had just one issue, which is I have two of my kids that have electric cars, and they pull their car in and plug it in their garage. Norwood doesn't have a lot of garages that you can do that. So that was my only concern, is having cords sprawled all over the place. So exactly, and you said that, Vic. So that's all I've got to say on this. I mean, from a zoning standpoint, it's accessory use. I like that. So that's kind of the restrictive in residential. But I don't know, I think it's going to happen. And I think it is already happening based on the businesses saying, if I want to be in a prominent business, I'm going to put them in. But I don't know where we, as a government agent, I don't know where we would fit. When you say stay out in front, Vic, I know what you're saying. Could we mandate something about, in every development? Sure. But then that becomes restrictive, doesn't it? Mm-hmm. And so where I stand is I think that the accessory use comment is right on target. I think, keeping cords away from sidewalks is a big deal. But I'm all for electric. I think once we can figure out what to do with all these batteries, they haven't figured that out yet. Is it going to cause more problems than the savings on electric? But I'll leave that for somebody a lot smarter than me. So with that, I don't have any other comments.
Mike?
I was going to just respond to both yours and the mayor's comments. So right now, the way, I guess, the revised policies are written, it's small r regulation. And again, I think that's appropriate based on what we know. And I would say it's small r and also soft, that we're not asking too much. We actually took away from before, I think, any regulation for less than 5. So moving on to the mayor's comments, if we want to be someone more proactive and requiring it, what we could do, and he brought the examples of larger, department stores, an office building, we have, Quality Inn or any other sort of mixed use, we could just dictate, and I'll use that word intentionally, that if you're going to provide for more than 100 or 150 parking stalls, then we will require X amount or X percentage being for EV station. So that would be definitely more forceful, not necessarily pro-marketplace, but at least requiring, hey, we're going to ask for this from major developers.
Maybe I'm misspeaking. I don't recall saying we're going to dictate. I don't recall ever saying we're going to require businesses to put these in. I don't recall saying that. Did I say that clearly to anybody? The mayor is not saying that we are going to force businesses, developers, or anybody to put electronic charging stations on their property. I did not state that. I want to make it clear. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is we should have regulations in up front, so when businesses come and say, we want to put this in right here on our parking lot, right along Montgomery Road, we can say, well, wait a minute, we've already addressed that. It cannot be in this area, it can be in this area, feel free. More power to you. But I think we should be ahead of those questions and have answers for them already. Again, the mayor of the city of Norwood is not saying that we will dictate to anybody that they have to put in charging stations. That is not what this discussion is about. This discussion is about making sure we're providing good guidance to people when they come and say, when business comes and says, we want to make the investment because we think it will be better for our business. When that happens, we should have things in place to say, we're with you. Here's what we see. Here's the vision that the Planning Commission saw for this, and we move forward from there. That's what this conversation's about. Not dictating anybody puts in these charging stations. Not. Okay.
So I actually agree with Mayor Schneider. It'd be nice for once for us to be, I shouldn't say for once, it'd be nice if we were ahead of the game on this. We have Quality Inn that's looking great right now. It's almost a flat vacant lot, right off of 562. We were talking about the major highways. That would be ideal. A place like that would be perfect. You could get right off of the highway and hit 71 or 75 within moments. I don't know how to work over Brookwood because it's already so tight. But I do agree. I agree with Mayor Schneider. We should be ahead of this and have a plan.
Additional comments?
I would like to ask, Mike, as you put together this table of different communities, Village of Commercial Point, Ohio, Hamilton, Mentor, which is close to Cleveland, Columbus, all of these, this information that you're providing primarily is accessory use, yes, question mark, not specified. And you've got a couple, can you go through just real quickly these highlighted on the left and help, and just give us a quick overview?
Sure. So when I did the survey, again, aside from saying I'm looking for these key words, there was no scientific methodology. What I was just going through from almost prior research is picking up on certain patterns. So going through the literature, it seemed that definitely there was always a discussion. Again, we had a nice, and I appreciate the clarity, whether it was going to be more regulation or more incentivized. So that thing has been resolved. The second big discussion was, it's going to be a principal use or an accessory? So that was definitely I wanted to have as a separate topic. Then we talked about residential, because typically, is it a commercial entity which you typically want to use zoning for, or is it something do we want to have policies, provisions for individual households? And it's a good point too with regards to discussions that we just had, if it's going to be for private use versus someone that could, almost as a quasi-home occupation allow for it. Mm-hmm. So that was there, and then obviously similarly commercial industrial. The conditional use hearing was interesting because I saw that in certain places where, as a default, if you don't want to be too permissive, and if you just, for maybe efficiency, say, hey, this is too complex for us, we're just going to allow our BZA way through it. And they have, certain standards that they typically use for any other use, we're going to give it to them to figure it out. So that I wanted to have highlighted as part of the survey. And then it was one of the things, okay, do you regulate it by X amount of regular parking stalls versus non? And I use that because typically that's something you would find for regular versus ADA type. And in case of the latter, that's specified by the feds. The last part, I think we talked about whether we would require an applicant to submit a land development, whether it's small or major. And then the last two were very minor, but I did see it as a recurring pattern where sometimes they would want to have canopies. Now, they were related to certain states, California, New Mexico, Arizona, Florida, where it was like a convenience for them. And then obviously signage. So those were at least the recurring patterns that I included here. And whether in the case of Ohio municipalities, they also followed suit as to including it in the ordinances, so.
You bring up a good point, talking about the parking reductions. So, and we've ran into that within the city as we've had developments on how many parking spots they have, what the size of the parking spots are, and would if they came to us with the development and said, we're going to put this development in and we're going to use 20 of the spots for EV charging, is that part of their parking structure, or is that not because you can't stay there longer than 2 hours to park there?
Correct.
How would we address that?
Correct, that's definitely an item for discussion. So some municipalities, if you have, and this is more, great to have a traffic engineer here to explain. So for uses where there's a lot of in and out, people are familiar, and I've heard it either here and the BCA, that some people are not happy with Rookwood with regards to the tightness of those stalls. So ideally, sometimes, if you're going to be in and out, you want to sometimes provide for a little bit more space, maneuverability. We're also getting away from SUVs, et cetera. And then for certain uses, like an office park, where people are there for a good 8-10 hours, then you can start having tighter stalls. So that's something also worthwhile. But at least for EVs, my preference would be, as long as they're adhering to our zoning ordinance, we're not going to require one way or another. It has to be consistent with all of their parking spaces.
I was thinking more of just the count.
I-
Does it count if they're supposed to have 30 spots? Does it? It
I
does.
would think that would be a determination for down the line. but
Right.
I think he may, and again, I'm just thinking,
Yeah. I
he
don't-
might include them as a regular space.
Because it's not in the code, I don't know how he would,
Yeah,
he's
that's-
not been presented with it.
That would be a regular space, counted the same way.
Really?
As long as it's not all, I mean, right now, your percentages are much smaller to EV versus regular, and if I can't park my car there and there's 150 of them in Surrey Square, then where am I shopping? But
Yeah, because the ADA is.
I'm being
I don't see
exaggerative.
that.
I'm being
That's
exaggerating.
exaggerating, but, yeah.
Like I said, I think in the future, the big thing, how I look at that, is that probably 5 years, 10 years down the road, this will be, and even whatever we put in here right now, because it's changing so rapidly, will be warranting further review.
Do the ADA do handicap parking spots? Is that part of your total count when you do a development like that?
Handicap parking spots is a percentage of the total count that's required,
Okay. All right.
based on what the use is in the facility.
Okay.
Any other comments?
I have a question about signage. So it says Cincinnati's concerned about signage. Mayor Schneider just said, and I've heard from other people, that there's apps that'll show you where the EV stations are. So what are they talking about? There's actually signs like on 71 say EV this way? Or what are
I
they-
think it was less about the wayfinding, it was more that now you have this area where people talk in terms of, eyeballs or whatever, so they put additional incidental or off-site signage to make up some additional revenue. So,
Okay.
Do you mean like on
Yeah,
the
wait.
charging stations?
on the
or-
charging stations are just additional signs around, so.
Like when you go to UDF and you pump your gas and it gives you a commercial?
Could be, yeah.
I'm sorry, this is,
Yeah, I was thinking like would be a sign outside of 71 saying this way, or that's what I thought it meant, so.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Well, but again, in terms of talking about it, that's a good point, because eventually, and again, I'll answer this like a township manager, or sometimes being concerned about public works, is there a responsibility for the city as part of wayfinding to provide, okay, turn here, turn there, indicate where these things are?
You can hit on the car, you can hit a button, and it will take you directly to the closest charging station that you can, it pops right up on the screen. You don't have to use your phone or anything. It's within Tesla's system, within Ford systems, it's all right there. We have signage at the city's lot. We have a sign that's set up there. It's not, it's not very prominent, but it shows up on my thing and tells me it's right there. You can go and charge your car. You know, Silverton put in their charging station behind their city building, and their public charging station behind the city building is free to the public. So they got some grants and some different funds, and they basically, you could go back, anybody could go there and charge up their car for free. Norwood doesn't do that. We charge. Just a little. All right.
So, Mike, I think what I'd like to see in terms of addition to the ordinance is really two things. One, that it be limited to accessory use in all zones. And then when we talk about residential zones, I think that there would be two appropriate restrictions. One be that the chargers must be for off-street use, and that they be limited to the residents at that property.
Okay.
Any comments or disagreements on that? Anything else anyone would like to see in addition?
There's so much more that could be added to it, but we've got to get further down the road. I mean,
Sir, as an accessory, does that mean something that would have to go to the Board of Zoning Appeals for approval as an accessory use?
I don't believe so.
Okay, thank you.
Well, thank you.
Would it be listed in the write-up which zones it's an approved accessory use?
I would think that it would be an approved accessory use in all zones.
That's what I guess I'm saying, so
That's the kind of-
it's taken care of by having that in the...
It was the word approved that I missed.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
well, it says village of, up there by Akron, Seville, yes, in all zones, level 3 only in commercial or industrial zones. And level 3 is where they're running, that's where they're running 6 charging stations, and basically they set up a huge transformer right there, and there's some serious electrical requirements to run a level 3 fast charging station. You're not going to have a level 3 at your house or residential area. You'd have to have 480 volt service, and that's not going to work. Not that I'm an electrician. Okay.
Okay. Anything else for discussion on this item? Yes.
Not for this item, but what I would like to do, if I get a chance, moving all into the entire document. So this document, in addition to EV, has about 6 other kind of related things we've been talking about. So at least I'll do a quick, sales pitch in terms of hopefully, if we're getting close, what I'd like to see maybe in the coming months or whatever to have the Planning Commission maybe consider scheduling a public hearing for this. So if we're getting close to looking at various policies, is it possible to kind of look at, the document in total and then have a public hearing and then endorse it and then put it on for consideration by council?
So I think what I would say is if you can have a final draft out to the Planning Commission members in the next 2 weeks, members can return comment during the 2 weeks leading up to the April Planning Commission meeting. We may be able to view that as a final draft and then put that on for a hearing for May to provide that to council after that. Does that sound agreeable to everyone?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Thank you all. Any new business? I'll make one motion to wish Mrs. Town a happy birthday today.
Thank you.
Do I have a second?
I'll second. We'll all second that.
Mrs. Town, would you please call the roll?
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you.
Happy birthday.
Thank you.
Any other new business? Seeing none, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
I would make a motion that we adjourn.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Ms. Town, would you please call the roll?
Chairman Powers,
Yes.
Mayor Schneider,
Yes.
Mrs. Sickinger,
Yes.
Mr. Hockney,
Yes.
Mr. Sewer.
Yes.
Thank you all.